Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Shred and Soul.
I'm Shred, aka Kevin Wood.
And I'm Soul, aka Wind Hughes.
Well, Mother's Day just came and went, and I think it's fair to say that we all have mothers.
We all have or had mothers.
Mm-hmm. Well, we all have mothers, and in your case, you are a mother.
I am a mom.
Mm-hmm. And so I stumbled upon some pretty interesting facts. Something called fetal microchimerism. And that's the exchange of cells from a baby to a mother and vice versa. It's a really fascinating aspect of motherhood.
It's amazing that happens. They used to think it happened infrequently, and now research shows that it happens with every pregnancy.
Not only that, but there are traces of your grandmother's cells being transferred in the same manner.
To us and to our children.
Mm-hmm.
So there's truly a multi-generational connection between all of us, which is pretty amazing. I mean, you could have your grandmother's cells in you.
Yeah, I could. And I probably do. It traces back, through the generations. And the benefits of these cells is that it can strengthen the immune system of both the mother and the child.
Mm-hmm.
And the child's cells can actually be used as stem cells. And they can go to various parts of the mother's body to bolster perhaps her circulation, or in some cases her ability of cognition, or other very important things that aid in the development of a healthy baby and to keep the mother healthy.
I was pretty fascinated by the idea that if a woman has a miscarriage, the cells of that infant very likely are within her, because it's, 6 weeks, up to 6 weeks, somewhere around there is when the cell transfer occurs. And then if she has another child, then that child can have the cells of the fetus that was miscarried, or even in an abortion, that those cells can be not only transferred to the mom, but then transferred to another child that mom has. And the implications for that collective consciousness and that imprint that we have between us is pretty amazing when you think of the energy those cells have and the possibilities, and what you said, utilizing them as stem cells, basically meaning that cell is undifferentiated. It's like a blank slate, and at what point it goes and decides to become a heart cell or a brain cell or a finger cell, and then that's called differentiation. It's differentiated from other cells. But these cells transferred from a child are act within us as stem cells, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it creates a physical bond between the mother and the child that I believe is essential for nurturing, and the care that one has for your child as a mother, I think, is probably more physically enhanced by this cell transfer. Unfortunately, fathers don't have that ability.
Yeah.
But
you have your ancestors in you.
Yeah, every father has a mother, so it kind of goes both ways.
And when you think of the fact that we all carry maybe all of the generations, is it possible that every ancestor I've had, in a sense, is transferred to me from the matriarchy, the matrilineal ancestry? Is pretty amazing, and to think that possibly we can tune in and connect to all of those ancestors that are within us.
But thinking about it, the exchange goes both ways. The child's cells go into the mother. So in my case, being a man, when I was a developing fetus, my cells were going into my mother. And studies show that these cells stay for a very long time.
If not a lifetime.
If not a lifetime.
Yeah.
And as we've discussed, through generations. So even though the mother-child bond is not possible with the father still transfers cells to the mother, and those cells are incorporated into the mother and can be transferred down the road to possibly siblings. I mean, the ramifications are fascinating.
Yeah.
You start to really tear it apart.
Yeah, and the understanding at this level is pretty new. I mean, we knew that it occurred, but we thought, years ago, research thought it was rare. And now we're finding out that it's in every pregnancy. Mm-hmm. These cells are transferred. So, yeah, maybe think about that in terms of your family. I feel like, I have my grandmother in me and my great-grandmother in me and all of the other ancestors in me, and even some of the male ancestors that have been transferred down through the grandmothers and the mothers, and we're all in each other.
Mm-hmm. And I think that bond between your mother is so strong that now we have a measurable physical aspect that can add to it and give us more understanding of how that happens. And it's not just the humans that this happens. You see in the animal kingdom how the bond between a cat and her kittens is so strong. I remember years ago I had a cat that gave birth to a litter of kittens, and we kept one of the kittens for a while. It was a leftover. Nobody seemed to want it. And we ended up taking the cat to a pet store, the baby cat. And the mother was just so distraught and so depressed. All of her babies were gone, and we couldn't take the sadness anymore. So we went back to the pet store and retrieved the kitten and brought it home. And the interaction between the two reunited mother and child was so heartwarming. I think we've all experienced that as far as seeing our animals and their connection to their offspring.
And another question, or just something to reflect upon, is what kind of bond does this cell transfer create? And are we assuming that it's emotional bond? Could it be purely biological, in that we share immunity and we share disease goes across this as well as immunity? Is it biological, physiological? What actual emotional or interpersonal bond is created, and how would they measure that? I don't know at this point.
Well, I think that when you look at postpartum depression, and in cases where miscarriages occur, and even abortions, there is a physical aspect of that it's involved in this exchange of cells, and an emotional reaction is usually precipitated by a physical reality.
But the question...
Emotions just don't come out of thin air.
Yeah, but saying that, could this be the cell transfer that causes maybe emotions after a birth, or is it hormones? And has nothing to do with the cells that were exchanged. There's so many things that affect a mother hormonally and chemically with a miscarriage, even an abortion and a birth, that may not at all be attributed to a cell transfer. So it's a very complex question about bonding, as well as, before I wanted to talk about what makes a good mother, and what does research show about that, and what do we feel in our hearts about that. There are plenty of mothers, and as a psychotherapist of decades and a coach and spiritual teacher, I can testify that there are many, many mothers that aren't good mothers, according to what we can talk about a good mother might be. There are many women that just for whatever reason, their own emotional or psychological development, trauma in their lives, can't really show up for their kids in the way we might expect a mother would. And then there are many, many fathers who are very capable of that bond, that very close, intimate bond that's unexplainable, and show up in amazing ways as a parent. So I don't know if being a mom, basically a woman identified biologically as a woman and a person who can bear children, is a guarantee that you're going to be a good parent at all. And so there are bonds that are developed between fathers and their children that sometimes don't exist between mothers and their children. So it's a very complex question. And what exactly is exchanged in the cells? I feel it more of biology as well as a collective consciousness that's exchanged.
You know, it makes me wonder, though, about unintended pregnancies, where a child is developing in a mother and that child was not welcomed there. Perhaps the transfer of cells could exacerbate the relationship, in that this is a felt presence. This is more than just an emotional bond. It's a physical thing. And in the case of an unwanted pregnancy, how would that come into play?
Well, isn't that the interesting question of, you know, you look at the holographic universe, that every cell in our being holds the entire universe. So if every cell that we transfer to a baby has not only the universe, but our emotional being imprinted on it, and if that moment, that emotional imprint is one of being stressed and frustrated, panicked, depressed, or not wanting that particular, in that moment, not wanting that child, that those things potentially are transferred through those cells. And I don't know if that's true. I believe these things are true, and that every cell of our being does contain the entire imprint and blueprint for the universe, thus the blueprint and imprint for humanity and us as parents transferred to the child. It's an interesting question, you know, and you know science will dive into this more fully and we'll have more answers probably pretty soon.
Yeah, well, you never know. It's you know, the aspect, the idea of the universe and its totality is something that isn't confined to a biological entity. If you really think about it, every aspect of a reality is contained within the whole. So it's
a fascinating question.
It's fascinating, and of course at lower realms of existence we have biology, and these things are here for a reason. It's fascinating to think of the ramifications of this, and how it all ties in with the wheels of consciousness and our existence as a whole. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to move on to something slightly different direction in terms of mothers, our mothers. I'm a mom, and you know, what's considered good qualities, positive qualities of a mother. And I'll read a few taken from a variety of research. But I would say, you know, as a psychotherapist of decades, there's a few things that I think are really, really important to transfer, in a sense, experience and embody as a parent, a mother in particular, if she's the primary caretaker, to your child, and watching many, many adults struggle with the parenting they've had that maybe didn't meet all of their needs, which is most of us. Most of us don't have perfect parents because we're human, and humans are imperfect, and none of us can be everything to any one person, including our children. But I think some of the things that are important are when a child grows up feeling loved, whether their parents were perfect or not at all, you know, great parents. But when a child feels loved, they can say in their heart of hearts, I know my mother and or father loves me. That matters, no matter what style of parenting that child was raised in. You know, what religion, what socioeconomic background, whatever the circumstances. When a child knows they are loved, that is huge. When a child feels seen and heard, that their parents have acknowledged who they are, support who they are, and even if there are differences, the reflection upon that child's behavior or feelings or thoughts is met with love, even if there's disagreement. If that child feels seen and heard, that's enormous in their development as a human being. They feel safe, they feel loved, no matter what else happens. So I wanted to read a few things, sort of a summary of what the qualities are for a good parent / good mother. One is nurturing and caring, demonstrating affection and concern for their child's well-being. Being patient. Oh my goodness, isn't that a challenge as a parent? Being patient, because sometimes we're not. Being empathetic, understanding and validating our child's emotions. That is really, really important, because even if our child is angry and depressed, we learn very early on as we grow as humans whether we are safe expressing our feelings, whatever they are. I'm angry, I'm vulnerable, I'm sad. And children don't always know why I'm angry or why I'm sad. I mean, we adults don't always know that. We're just pissed today. But being empathetic, being able to hold that and hear it with the child without judgment is really important. Being consistent in discipline, which means clear rules, clear expectations, and enforcing them consistently. That's how a young person establishes their sense of reality. Where is the boundary? Where does this begin and that end? Real important. Being firm but fair. And good communication. That means effectively expressing your feelings and actively listening to a child, which means looking them in the eye, being present with them, and letting them know that you hear them. Doesn't mean agree. And the same with adults. Active listening is essential for our development. Encouraging independence, a belief in our children, prioritizing quality time. There is nothing more sacred that we can give another human being, especially children, but even each other, as a couple, than prioritizing time, quality time together. Values and respecting those values, providing emotional support for your children, setting boundaries and keeping them, modeling positive behavior. As a parent, as a mom, being self-aware and self-reflective, who am I, what am I, why am I even doing this? There's nothing better than a child saying, why? Why can't I go here? Or why can't I go there? And not that we have to explain it to them every time, but it causes us to reflect on, why do I even have this role? Why is it even important to me? Being resilient. That means our children seeing us being resilient, overcoming challenges, and modeling for them that we can overcome challenges and setbacks. Being supportive of them, and being loving and accepting. So this is what research shows are very important qualities of a parent, and today speaking about mothers. Any thoughts on that?
Well, everybody tries their best, and you can only do what you're equipped to do. There are certain times and certain circumstances where you can't meet these goals of being a good parent, but you do the best you can, and I think that that's only fair. And if you look at it in the big picture of emerging consciousness, we're not all born perfect, and we're not all born with the same capabilities. And these things are tools for us to learn how to navigate the world that we live in and how to possibly gain skills that are more nurturing, more understanding, more forgiving. And I think that these underlying skills are not only skills for parents, but they are underlying skills for all social interactions in how we deal with one another on a whole.
So just respectful interactions between humans?
Right. And we're given our children, we have children, and these are huge opportunities to learn new skills and to develop these higher aspects of communication with another person who not only is your child, but part of you, literally a piece of you that is here that you helped create. You usher in this creation. And this list is not just for mothers, it's for fathers too. And I think that learning about these things and trying to incorporate them is so beneficial for a young person being our child, and that they need this foundation to grow up to be more productive and more caring and more nurturing themselves, to have a successful life. I think it's very important for them to have these things. Not to say that, if some of these aspects of nurturing don't exist, that everything's going to go haywire. That's not the case at all.
I think if they're missing, if we don't get some of these things from our parents, we, in a sense, and literally, have to go inside ourselves and become our own internalized parent so we can heal that and give ourselves what we need. If we haven't been listened to, we haven't been nurtured, we haven't received a lot of these things, boundaries. If we never learned how to set proper boundaries, there's a point at which we grow up as adults and we have to go back and internalize these qualities and experiences for ourselves, whether we reach out to other elders, whether we, go into therapy, whether we learn in a significant relationship, but we go back, and it's totally possible for us to go back and reparent ourselves and give ourselves the things that we're lacking. And so our parents, like you said, are imperfect, and we don't always get all of these things. And I think of that self-acceptance, boundary setting, good communication skills. We're totally capable of learning that on our own if we didn't receive that from our parents.
But then again, you have to be aware that these are deficiencies possibly in your own emotional makeup. And I don't think everybody is equipped to even notice or be aware that these things might need some attention.
I think we learn pretty quickly when we don't communicate well. We get the feedback.
We might not be able to put it into words, or
but
we might not be able to connect all the dots, is what I'd like to say, because it's a wide variety of capabilities and levels of awareness that we live with.
I think we have that awareness. Maybe I just have more faith and hope in adults being a psychotherapist. When something isn't working, or even doing spiritual counseling, when something isn't working in our lives, we usually know. We have friends or family that say, I said no and you keep coming, back off. That's a boundary issue. And we find that it keeps repeating in our lives. And then we either lose relationships, or we have someone who says, let me help you, or you need some counseling, or someone loves you so much that they want to sit and work on these issues with you. I think that we're not that clueless. I think we get a lot of clues about it.
Well, we do, but whether we can absorb those cues and to do things about them is another thing.
So what do you say?
I'm saying that we might feel there's some deficiencies, but we might not have the tools to even recognize what they truly are or how to deal with them. I'm thinking about in the forest here where we live. 150 years ago, we had people who were living in these trees, and they were harvesting the trees. They were working day and night through all kinds of weather, all kinds of climates, very primitive states. And I think that through that, they've built something that could possibly be an easier life. If your life is really hard and you're barely surviving, I don't think there's a lot of time for introspection. That's all I'm saying. You might know there's something wrong, but
I think you lead me to something else that I'm always interested in, and that is how our society, our culture, and specifically socioeconomic background impacts one's ability to parent and be a healthy mom. And, when you're poor and you're working 60 hours a week, it's very difficult to be patient and to have that quality time with your child and to give them the presence that, every child deserves. It also means that parent has a more challenging time accessing the resources to help them gain the tools that they might need. Having money matters in terms of accessing resources, getting the help, keeping our own sanity in place. The mom who can afford it goes and gets a massage.
It can help.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are cases where people have had all kinds of money and still can't figure out what's going wrong in there.
That's not saying money makes the best parent. Yeah. There's no correlation with that. But we're talking about the tools, which is what you said, that not everybody has the tools. And sometimes money helps us to get away, to go to the class, to get a little parental coaching, to reach out in ways to access the tools. So I think that socioeconomic class is known to have an impact on parenting. Depression and stress when you're not sure how you're going to pay the rent.
Right.
Those kind of things matter in parenting.
And cultures too.
Yeah, very much so.
In their regard for these kind of things. A culture that perhaps doesn't really see the necessity of being nurturing or forgiving.
And I think it's important to separate out mother and mothering from parenting, because there is an entire experience that a mother has, being the one who gives birth. That divine feminine aspect that is the vessel that we are, that channels life through us, if that's what we choose to do in terms of having a child. Women also can be vessels to channel creative energy. They may not choose to be a parent. It's not essential to be a creative, mothering, nurturing force, a generative force in terms of ushering creative life, creative energy into this world. And women have a different relationship to that, because biologically we have wombs, we have that generative place. We say Mother Nature, Earth, Mother, Father, Sky. And that's one of the aspects that for me Mother's Day has always been symbolic to me, is that we celebrate the mother, not just the human mother, but our Earth Mother. And I know I'm jumping to a whole different aspect, but I don't want to end this episode without honoring that divine feminine energy. And our Earth Mother, she holds our life and she nurtures us and provides for us in very significant ways. And the earth has that mothering relationship to us. And when we watch nature and we understand nature and how living forces and living plants and other living beings live, when we observe them, we see what, as you said, animals, how we care for each other, and we see the life cycle and what is necessary to feed that life. Going through the seasons, we're planting seeds, we're actualizing the warmth of the sun. In the fall, where things are dying off, and we're releasing those things that don't serve us back into the earth, and it creates compost that then carries us through the winter. And that's a cycle of life. And I think parenting as well. We plant these seeds and we have our children or some creative force in the universe. We go through that beautiful springtime. In the summer, that's the time of our lives where we can cultivate our art, our activities, or our children. It's the mothering, parenting years. And then we need to know when to let go. Just like in the fall, we let go. So that cycle, even in human parenting, there's a point we have to let go and allow them to be independent. And it's a loss for us. We cry when our kids leave. But all of that letting them go becomes a compost that then they take with them, and they go off and have their own lives. And in the winter of our lives, we might find ourselves living by ourselves without our children. So that life cycle is very much a part of mothering in our lives and in the earth. And it's really important for me on Mother's Day to acknowledge that divine feminine and acknowledge that divine cycle of life that we experience. And very specifically, we mothers of children or mothers of creation carry within us.
Very good. Well, that's our take on Mother's Day.
Yeah.
And happy Mother's Day to my mom.
Happy Mother's Day to my mom out there in the cosmos and the spirit world. She was pretty amazing. Maybe we can take a minute, just mention our moms.
I just did.
I mean, a little more.
Go ahead.
My mom was an incredibly strong woman. And you know how when we're growing, we tend to reject our parents when we're teenagers, which is totally appropriate to maybe push away a little bit so we can discover who we are. You know, this is them, this is us. And then sometimes later in life, we say, oh, I really kind of liked that thing that my parent had, even though I rejected it when I was younger. And I certainly know that as I grew older, I realized that I was so much like my mother. And so many of my strengths that I rejected when I was younger, I grew to realize I had because of her. I had because she was the role model, and she taught me those qualities, even though I wasn't aware of it when I was younger. So I grew to really respect my mother and her strengths and her intelligence and her ability to navigate the world as a single woman, a strong woman. And I really valued that, you know, as well as her ability to love. She was a very loving mother and a very loving grandmother. And that's not saying we had perfect times, because when I was a teenager, I ran away from home. I couldn't get away faster. But as I grew, we became best friends. I talked with my mom every day for my entire life, pretty much. She was my buddy and the person I would call with the news. And I really respected her, and I really loved her dearly, and I miss her a lot.
Yeah. And, you know, my mom has always been so supportive and absolutely behind everything that I've ever done. And she's always been fun and enjoyed a good laugh. And I remember being a kid hanging out with her. My father was very busy, and she raised me and my brothers almost single-handedly, and I have nothing but the utmost warmth and love for her and her efforts in raising me and my brothers. Like I said, she introduced us to music. She supported us in our endeavors in that regard. She was so supportive in other ways as well, just being loving. And even when we'd get in trouble, there was always that time when it would come together. She would make sure that was just temporary feeling, and that she loved us, and she still is very loving and very supportive to this day. And I truly regard her as not only my mother, but one of my best friends and my closest ally.
To moms.
To moms.
All you moms out there, whether you have children or the moms of creation, we value you and we honor you today. We need you in our world. So with that, I hope you all had a great Mother's Day. Celebrating Mother Earth. If you don't have a mother living on Earth at this time, or you're not close with your mom, you know, that's a day to celebrate just the creative life force and everything. And I hope you all had a beautiful day sharing that in whatever way you did. So comment, please. Share your stories with us. We really value that. Subscribe if you want.
Mm-hmm. Subscribe and hit like.
Yeah.
And
come back.
We'll see you again next time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.